Imagine an old black man walking into a bank, dressed in ragged clothes, carrying nothing but a dusty sack. Everyone inside laughed at him. They thought he was a poor beggar who had lost his way. But what they didn't know was that inside that sack lay the power to change everything. Because in just a few moments, this man would shock the entire bank by revealing something no one saw coming. And when the truth came out, those who laughed would regret it. Forever the glass doors of the Grand City Bank slid open with sharp hiss, letting in a faint gust of dry wind from the street outside. It was a normal morning in the downtown financial district. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under golden lights, the walls shimmered with polished brass fixtures, and the air carried a faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with freshly brewed coffee. Suited businessmen walked briskly to the counters. Women in heels tapped across the lobby with designer handbags, and the constant hum of printers, phones, and quiet conversations filled the space. And then he walked in. An old black man, his back slightly bent with age, shuffled slowly through the doorway. His steps were uneven, his shoes worn thin, and the coat on his shoulders was faded and patched from years of use. In his hand, he clutched a rough, dusty sack tied at the top with fraying rope. The sack looked out of place in this glittering palace of wealth. It was a kind of sack you might expect to see on a farmer's back, not in a bank filled with million-dollar accounts. For a moment, nobody paid him much attention. But as he walked further in, his presence began to stir whispers. The contrast was too sharp. While everyone else in the bank looked polished and wealthy, he looked like someone who had barely scraped through life. His gray hair peeked out from under an old cap, his face lined with wrinkles that spoke of decades of hardship. And yet his eyes, though tired, carried something different, something sharp, determined, almost fiery. A security guard near the entrance leaned toward his partner and muttered under his breath, "Another old man looking for change." They both smirked. A pair of businessmen sitting on a leather sofa noticed the sack and chuckled at each other. One whispered, "What's he going to do? Deposit a bag of potatoes?" Their laughter was quiet, but cruel. Still, the man kept walking. He didn't flinch, didn't stop, didn't turn to acknowledge their mockery. His steps were slow, but there was a strange authority in the way he moved, as if every shuffle of his feet carried a purpose greater than the room could understand. At the main desk, a young banker looked up from her computer and froze. She was used to seeing wealthy clients in silk suits and sparkling jewelry, but this man, with his ragged clothes and dusty sack, didn't fit the picture at all. Forcing a polite smile, she asked, "Sir, can I help you?" The old man set the sack down gently on the polished marble floor. It landed with a heavy thud, making a few people nearby glance over. Without hesitation, he said in a steady voice, "I have come to see the manager. Tell him the owner of this bank has arrived." The words fell into the air like a stone in still water. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, it rippled through the room. A businessman coughed to cover his laughter. A woman at the counter stifled a giggle. The guard smirked openly now. And then, as if on cue, the entire lobby filled with quiet chuckles, whispers, and outright laughter. "Owner of the bank?" One man muttered, shaking his head. "What's next? He'll say he owns a whole street." Another laughed louder. "Somebody call police before this old man embarrasses himself even more." The banker at the desk tried to maintain her professionalism, but even she struggled to hide her disbelief. She leaned forward and whispered, "Sir, maybe you're in the wrong place. This is the city bank, one of the largest in the country. You can't just walk in here and—" But before she could finish, the old man straightened his back. His voice, though rough with age, boomed with clarity. "I said, call your manager. The true owner of this place has come." This time, the laughter grew louder. The sound bounced off the marble walls, turning the grand lobby into a theater of mockery. People nudged each other, pointing at him. Some even pulled out their phones, ready to record what they thought would be a funny scene to share online later. Yet the old man did not break. His eyes scanned the room, and though dozens of faces mocked him, he seemed almost immune to their ridicule. He adjusted the sack at his feet, rested his hands on it, and stood tall as his tired bones allowed. To an outsider, it might have looked like stubbornness, but if anyone had looked closely enough, they would have seen something else. Conviction. A deep, unshakable belief that he was not a fool, not lost, not mistaken. He knew something that nobody else in that room did, and that knowledge made him fearless. The banker tried again, this time more firmly. Sir, please, this isn't the place for jokes. If you need help with a deposit or withdrawal, I can assist. But if you don't have real business here, I'll have to ask security to escort you out. But the old man simply replied, My business here is greater than deposits and withdrawals. My business is this very building, this bank, and the ground it stands on. And if your manager has sense, he will speak to me. If not, then he will regret ignoring me. The security guard stepped closer, ready to remove him, but something in his voice, calm yet commanding, made them hesitate. They looked at the banker for direction, but even she seemed unsure now. After all, though the man looked poor, he didn't sound like a beggar. He spoke like someone used to being listened to, and so, reluctantly, she picked up the phone and called the manager's office. As she explained what was happening, her voice carried just enough disbelief that the manager himself grew irritated. The owner of the bank? He snapped through the receiver. Fine, I'll deal with this nonsense myself. As she hung up, the old man bent down and slowly untied the rope around his sack. Everyone nearby leaned forward, curious. What could possibly be inside? Food? Rags? Junk? The laughter quieted, replaced by murmurs of speculation. The man's gnarled fingers worked carefully, almost ceremoniously, as though he were about to reveal something sacred. And as he pulled open the sack, the world inside that glittering bank lobby was about to change forever. The roar of applause still thundered in the grand marble lobby. The once mocking crowd was now on its feet, clapping, cheering, and recording every moment as though they had just witnessed history unfold. And in truth, they had. The old man stood at the center, steady and unmoved, his sack by his side, his weathered hands resting on the documents that had shaken an empire. His eyes scanned the room, not with pride, but with a quiet satisfaction, as if he had simply fulfilled a duty entrusted to him long ago. Whitman, meanwhile, slumped in the corner like a broken statue. His once pristine suit now seemed dull, his face drained of color, his shoulders bent under the crushing weight of humiliation. The man who had ruled with arrogance and intimidation for years was nothing more than a shadow of himself. Customers ignored him. Employees avoided his gaze. Cameras no longer cared for his face, only for the old man who had taken back what was rightfully his. The lead lawyer approached the old man, bowing his head respectfully. Sir, everything is in order. Legally, this bank is yours. The board will need to be informed, but they have no choice. You are the rightful owner now. The old man gave a slow nod. I do not seek vengeance, he said softly. I seek only to honor the promise made a century ago. This bank will not fall. It will rise again, but this time with integrity. The crowd murmured in approval. Even the employees, those who had feared Whitman's wrath, looked relieved, as though a dark cloud had been lifted from their lives. The young banker who had first dismissed him stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm sorry for doubting you, she whispered. I laughed when you first came in. I thought you were crazy. But now I see who you really are. The old man placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Child, you owe me no apology. The world teaches us to trust what glitters. But true worth is often hidden, quiet, patient, waiting to be revealed. Let this be a lesson, not a burden. His words carried more weight than any lecture or book could. They sank into the hearts of everyone present, a truth no one would forget. Outside, the sidewalk was packed. Reporters shoved microphones forward, shouting questions as cameras flashed wildly. Sir, how does it feel to reclaim your inheritance after 99 years? One called. What will happen to the bank now? Another asked. What do you say to those who mocked you? A third shouted. The old man paused at the glass doors before stepping outside. He turned back to the lobby one last time, his gaze falling on Whitman. Whitman looked up, his eyes filled with bitterness and shame. The old man did not smile, nor did he gloat. He simply said, Your reign ends here. But let this be a lesson to you. 2. Arrogance builds castles on sand, and the tide always comes. With that, he stepped through the doors. The crowd outside erupted with cheers and camera flashes, the sound of history echoing down the city streets. For weeks afterward, the story dominated headlines. Old man claims bank ownership and wins. Videos of the confrontation spread across social media like wildfire, racking up millions of views. People everywhere debated the story, many calling it the greatest underdog victory of the century. Employees of the bank described their relief. Customers shared their awe, and even strangers who had never stepped foot in the building felt inspired. The story wasn't just about money or ownership. It was about justice, about patience, about truth finally winning after being buried for generations. And Whitman, his career was over. No firm would hire him. No bank would trust him. He disappeared from public view, a cautionary tale of pride brought low by the very thing he thought he controlled. But the old man, he became a symbol of resilience, of faith and justice, of the quiet strength carried by those the world dismisses. He didn't flaunt his victory. He didn't move into a mansion or bathe in wealth. Instead, he rebuilt the bank, not as a fortress of greed, but as a place of fairness, for employees, for customers, for the community. And every day, as he walked the marble floors, sack still in hand, people greeted him with respect, not because of the papers he carried, but because of the truth he embodied. He had walked and mocked. He had walked out a legend, and that, my friends, is the unbelievable true story of the old man with a sack who walked into a bank and walked out its owner. A story that shows us all that arrogance may shine for a while, but truth shines forever. What do you think of this incredible story? Was Whitman's downfall deserved? And what lesson do you take away from the old man's victory? Let us know in the comments below. We love reading your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next powerful story we share. Until next time, remember, justice may be delayed, but it is never denied. The applause still echoed in the marble lobby, rolling like thunder. It wasn't polite or hesitant. It was loud, raw, and real, the sound of truth breaking chains. The old man stood tall at the center, his weathered hands resting on the sack that had carried the weight of his father's promise for nearly a century. Around him, the crowd saw not rags, but resilience, not poverty, but power. Richard Whitman, however, stood paralyzed. His once proud shoulders drooped, his polished shoes no longer so steady on the shining floor. For decades, he had been the face of power in this bank, the man who barked orders, who controlled careers, who carried himself as if the building itself bent to his will. But now, with a few sheets of paper in the weight of history, his empire had collapsed. Mr. Whitman, the lead lawyer, said cautiously, "Legally, you have no standing here anymore. The documents are airtight. This bank is no longer under your authority." The words were like daggers. Whitman's lips trembled as he tried to speak, but only fragments came out. "No, this can't." He slammed his fist against the counter again, but it sounded hollow, like the last desperate cry of a man who knew he was beaten. The crowd wasn't sympathetic. They murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads, others openly smirking at his downfall. One man whispered loudly, "So much for the big man in the suit." Another chuckled, "Guess he's not as powerful as he thought." For Whitman, the humiliation cut deeper than any legal loss. He had built his career on fear and control, on being untouchable. And now, in front of employees, customers, and even strangers with cameras, he was exposed, weak, defeated, small. The old man's voice rose, calm yet commanding, silencing the whispers. "Richard Whitman," he said slowly, "you mocked me when I entered. You mocked this sack, these papers, and the years etched into my face. You thought wealth and arrogance could stand above truth. But look around you now." He gestured to the crowd, clapping, murmuring, recording. "They see you for what you are. And they see me not as a beggar, not as a fool, but as what I've always been, the rightful heir to this place." Whitman's face turned red with fury. "You think you've won," he spat. "Do you know who I am? I'll fight this in court. I'll drag it out for years if I have to. You'll die before you see a single brick of this bank in your name." The old man did not flinch. Instead, he slowly reached into his sack. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath. For a moment, it felt like the entire world paused. From the sack, he pulled not another paper, but a small leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age. He opened it carefully, flipping to a marked page, then handed it to the nearest lawyer. "Read it," the old man commanded. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, scanning the page. His eyes widened almost immediately. He read aloud, "In the event that the 99-year lease is not renewed, ownership shall revert to the descendants of the original leaseholder. Any attempt to resist this transfer shall be deemed void, and legal recourse shall be denied." The room gasped again. The lawyer looked up, stunned. It even blocks legal challenges. This document was drafted to prevent exactly what Mr. Whitman is suggesting. The crowd erupted once more, some clapping, others cheering. The businessman who had been live streaming shook his head in disbelief. Oh my God! He thought he could fight this in court, but the contract saw through him 100 years ago. Whitman staggered back, his face pale. He looked like a man who had just been handed his own execution notice. The old man stepped closer, his eyes locked onto Whitman's trembling figure. "Your threats are empty, Richard. My father prepared for men like you. He knew greed would one day try to cling to what was not its own, and he made sure justice could not be denied. You have no power left, no authority, not even a voice in this matter." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to vanish. All eyes were on Whitman, who stood cornered, broken, destroyed by a truth he could not escape. For the first time, Whitman's eyes dropped. His voice, once booming, now cracked and hollow. This isn't fair." The old man leaned in, his voice low, but sharp enough to cut through the air. "No, Richard, it is finally fair." The crowd erupted again, this time in cheers. Some clapped, some whistled, some shouted words of support for the old man. Even employees who had once feared Whitman joined in, their applause a symbol of their freedom. Reporters outside pressed against the glass, cameras flashing wildly as they captured the scene of the century. A powerful banker brought to his knees by a man everyone had mocked. Whitman tried one last time to stand tall, but it was useless. His knees wobbled, his pride shattered, his empire gone. The old man straightened, his sack back at his side, and turned toward the crowd. His voice rang out, clear and steady. "This bank is mine, not to hoard, not to oppress, but to honor the promise my father made. For 99 years, we waited. Today, justice has come home." The crowd roared in approval, and Richard Whitman, once the ruler of the Marble Kingdom, slipped quietly into the shadows, defeated, forgotten, erased by the very truth he tried to deny. The final blow had been struck. The old man had won. The bank lobby felt like the eye of a storm. For hours, or perhaps only minutes that felt like hours, the old man had stood his ground, while Whitman, once untouchable, grew weaker with every passing moment. The panic had subsided into tense silence now, a silence so thick it pressed against everyone's chest. The legal team sat hunched at a table, poring over the last of the documents. They flipped pages carefully, their eyes scanning every word, every stamp, every faded signature. The crowd held its breath, waiting. Finally, the lead lawyer straightened, his face pale but resolute. He cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly as he addressed the entire lobby. "Ladies and gentlemen, there is no question anymore. These documents are authentic. The lease was signed 99 years ago. It expired last month. No renewal exists. By the letter of the law," he paused, adjusting his glasses as though the weight of history pressed on him. "This bank and the land it stands on now legally belong to the heir of the original leaseholder." The words rang out like a bell. Clear, final. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Customers clutched their phones tighter, recording every second. Some broke into whispers of disbelief, others into murmurs of awe. The old man, calm as ever, simply nodded. "As I told you, the truth always returns." For a moment, Whitman didn't move. His face was stiff, his hands trembling at his sides. Then, slowly, his denial cracked. No, this is absurd." His voice rose to a near shout, desperate, broken. "You can't do this. You can't take my bank away. I built this. I made this." The crowd stirred. A few people scoffed openly. A man in a business suit muttered, "You didn't build it. You just profited off it." A woman near the front said louder, "Maybe it was never yours to begin with." Whitman's face twisted with rage. He slammed a fist against the counter, but the sound no longer carried authority. It carried the panic of a man watching his empire crumble. The old man finally stepped forward, his sack still resting against his side. His eyes, sharp despite his years, locked on Whitman. "You built nothing, Richard Whitman. You managed, you profited, but you did so on land that was entrusted, not given. My father gave 99 years of prosperity to this institution. That time is over. Now, the land returns to its rightful bloodline." His voice, steady and commanding, filled the room. The young banker, who had once doubted him, now looked at him with awe. "Sir," she whispered, "I've never seen anything like this. You've changed everything today." The old man gave her a small smile. "Not I, child. Truth did." Outside, through the glass doors, the crowd on the sidewalk had grown. Reporters had arrived, cameras flashing, microphones ready. News vans pulled up, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. The world beyond the bank was about to learn what had happened. Inside, the employees looked at each other nervously. Some whispered, "What if he becomes our new boss?" Others said, "At least he seems fairer than Whitman." The atmosphere shifted. Where there had once been doubt, now there was belief. Where there had been laughter, now there was respect. The old man, who had entered mocked and dismissed, now stood as the undeniable owner of the very building that had ridiculed him. Whitman, desperate, turned to the lawyers. "There has to be a loophole. Something, anything. This can't be final." But the lead lawyer shook his head grimly. "Sir, there is no loophole. The law is clear. The bank does not belong to you." Whitman's breath came fast and shallow. His arrogance was crumbling, replaced by fear. He looked around at the crowd, at the cameras, at his own staff watching him fall apart. For the first time, he realized he had lost. The old man walked slowly to the counter, placed his hand gently on the documents, and lifted them into his sack. His movements were calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of a century of patience. Then he looked back at the crowd. "You all laughed when I walked in," he said, his voice low but carrying across the lobby. "You mocked the sack, the clothes, the years on my face. But now you see, truth does not wear fine suits. Justice does not glitter with wealth. It lives here." He tapped the documents. "In the promises that cannot be erased." The crowd erupted, not with panic this time, but with applause. It started small, a single clap, then another, until the lobby thundered with it. Even some of the bank employees joined, clapping for the man they had once ridiculed. Whitman stood frozen, his face pale, his lips pressed into a tight line. The applause wasn't for him anymore. The respect wasn't his anymore. His reign was over. The old man nodded once, humbly, then turned his gaze back to Whitman. "You had your time. Now it is mine, and I will honor it better than you ever did." For the first time all day, Whitman had no reply. He looked small, broken, a shadow of the man who had once ruled the bank with arrogance and fear. The turning point had arrived. The balance of power had shifted, and there was no going back. The silence after the lawyer's declaration was almost unbearable. Everyone in the bank, the customers, the clerks, even the security guards, seemed frozen in place, as if time itself had stopped. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint shuffle of papers on the counter. Then, suddenly, the room erupted. Voices rose all at once, blending into a storm of shock, fear, and confusion. "He owns the bank. Does that mean my account is at risk? What happens to the money? Is this even legal?" The once mockery-filled lobby now shook with the panic of uncertainty. The customers, who had laughed and filmed moments earlier, were now demanding answers. Their mocking smirks had transformed into tight, fearful expressions. The young banker tried to calm a group of customers gathering at her desk, but their questions came faster than she could answer. "What about my mortgage?" one man shouted. "Does he own my loan now?" another asked, his voice cracking with anxiety. The businessman who had been recording live turned his phone toward his own face, speaking to his online audience. "You guys, you won't believe this. This old man just proved he owns the entire bank. The documents are real. This is history." His live stream chat exploded with messages, hearts, and shocked emojis. Manager Richard Whitman felt his carefully constructed world collapsing. His authority, once so absolute, was slipping away like sand through his fingers. His employees were panicking. His customers were demanding answers. And worst of all, that stubborn old man with the sack still stood tall, unshaken. Whitman barked orders, his voice booming above the chaos. "Everyone calm down. This means nothing. The bank is safe, your money is safe, nothing has changed." But his words only fueled the panic. A woman shouted back, "How can you say that the bank doesn't belong to you anymore?" Another man jabbed a finger toward Whitman. "You've been running this place under false ownership." The guards shifted uneasily, unsure if they were supposed to protect Whitman, the customers, or the old man. For the first time, their hands hesitated on their batons. The old man raised a hand, and surprisingly, his calm voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Do not fear. Your money is safe. Your homes are safe. This is not about taking from you. This is about truth, long buried, finally rising." His voice carried such quiet authority that the crowd actually hushed for a moment. Even those trembling with panic felt an odd reassurance in his tone. Whitman, furious, slammed his palm against the counter. "Don't listen to him. He's nothing but a fraud trying to steal what generations have built." The lead lawyer stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, with respect, the documents prove otherwise. Legally, this building and the land it sits on are his. If we don't handle this correctly, we could face lawsuits, government intervention, even federal inquiries." Whitman glared at him, his face red. "Are you out of your mind? Do you know how this makes us look? If word gets out." But it was already too late. Word was out. The businessman's live stream had already gone viral. Dozens of phones were recording every word, every expression, every slip of control. The world outside the bank would know soon enough. The young banker clutched the counter, her heart racing. She whispered to her colleague, "I've never seen him, Whitman, so shaken." Her colleague nodded nervously. "It's like he's scared." And indeed, for the first time, fear flickered in Whitman's eyes. The panic wasn't just among the customers. Bank employees began whispering to each other, their faces pale. "What if he fires us all?" "No, what if he becomes our new boss?" "Do we owe him loyalty now?" The old man stood silently, letting the storm of panic rage around him. He didn't need to raise his voice again. Every second that passed only proved his case more. Every nervous glance, every stammered question, every broken command from Whitman made his presence stronger. Finally, Whitman tried to seize control again. He stepped forward, pointing a trembling finger at the old man. "You think you've won? You think a dusty sack and some papers make you powerful? This bank is more than documents. It's a living institution, and I will not hand it over to a man who looks like he crawled out of the past." The words were harsh, cutting. Some in the crowd gasped at the insult, but the old man did not flinch. He simply looked at Whitman with a gaze so steady, so piercing, it was as though he could see straight through him. "I did not come here for power," the old man said slowly, each word heavy with meaning. "I came for justice. My father gave this land in trust for 99 years. Those years have ended. Now the land returns to his blood. You may rage, you may fight, but the truth is not yours to control." The words struck the crowd harder than any shouted command from Whitman. People nodded, murmured, even whispered, "He's right." Whitman's face was pale now, sweat glistening at his temples. He turned desperately to the lawyers. "Find a loophole. There must be one. I don't care what it takes. Find it." But the lawyers said nothing. Their silence was louder than any confirmation. The panic spread beyond the walls of the bank. Phones buzzed with alerts. People were calling friends, family, even reporters. Already outside the large glass windows, a small crowd was forming on the sidewalk, drawn by rumors of something extraordinary happening inside. The old man adjusted his sack, his expression calm, almost sorrowful. He looked around the bank, at the marble floors, the polished counters, the gleaming lights. For years you laughed at men like me. For years you built towers on land that was not yours. You forgot that every empire must one day answer to the soil beneath its feet. The crowd shivered. His words carried the weight of prophecy. Whitman opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. He looked smaller now, diminished, like a man cornered by the truth. The authority he once carried so effortlessly was gone, replaced by desperation. The panic inside the bank had reached its peak. And yet, in the center of the storm, the old man stood untouched, like a rock in a raging river, immovable, eternal. The bankers were panicking. The customers were panicking. But the old man, he was only getting stronger. The air inside the bank lobby had grown thick, as if the very walls were holding their breath. What began as a comedy show at the expense of an old man was quickly turning into something else entirely. Laughter had vanished. Phones that were once held high to record his humiliation were now lowered, their owners uncertain if they were capturing history instead. Manager Richard Whitman stood rigid, his jaw tight, clutching the old documents in his hand. His confidence had wavered, though he tried not to show it. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by someone the world saw as a nobody. Bring the legal team. Now, he snapped to one of his assistants. Within minutes, a group of 3 lawyers emerged from a side office, their sharp suits crisp, their expressions cool and professional. These were the bank's protectors, the ones called upon whenever contracts, lawsuits, or threats to the institution arose. If anyone could tear apart the old man's claims, it would be them. Whitman handed over the bundle of papers with a dismissive gesture. "Tell him he's wasting his time," he said coldly. The lead lawyer, a tall man with glasses perched on his nose, adjusted his tie and began scanning the first page. The moment his eyes landed on the document, his composure shifted ever so slightly. His brow furrowed. He flipped to the second page, then the third. His lips pressed into a thin line. The old man stood silently, watching. His hands rested on the sack at his feet, his face calm. The crowd, unable to restrain themselves, leaned closer. Some whispered, "What's taking them so long? Maybe the papers are real? No way, but why does he look so serious?" The young banker, who had first spoken to the old man, tried to peer at the papers over the lawyer's shoulder. She caught sight of dates, 1924, 1925. Her heart skipped. That was nearly a century ago. The lawyer finally looked up, his face pale. "Mr. Whitman," he said quietly, this document is not a forgery." The words hung in the air like thunder. Whitman's face darkened. "What did you say?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "The paper is aged appropriately. The ink, the stamps, the signatures, they match the records from the city archives. I'd need more time for full verification, but from my initial review, this appears authentic." Gasps spread across the lobby. The old man allowed himself the faintest of smiles, though his eyes remained steady. Whitman, desperate to maintain control, scoffed loudly. "Authentic or not, what does it matter? These papers are ancient history." But the lawyer shook his head slowly. He flipped the page back to the lease agreement, his finger tapping the line of text near the bottom. His voice grew heavier as he read aloud. "This lease shall remain in effect for a term of 99 years, commencing on the first day of March 1924 and expiring on the first day of March 2023. The bank fell into silence. The lawyer looked up at Whitman. "Sir, that lease expired last month." The crowd erupted with gasps and murmurs. Some clutched their chests in disbelief. Others shook their heads in shock. People who had mocked the old man only minutes earlier now stared at him with wide eyes. Whitman's face went pale. His carefully constructed mask of authority was cracking. He tried to brush it off. Expired or not, leases are renewed. There must be records of payment, renewal agreements, something. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "I checked our system before coming down here. We have records of rent payments, but no renewal contract. It seems the bank assumed ownership was permanent after all this time. But legally, without renewal, he swallowed hard. The property reverts to the original owner's heirs. The old man finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying the weight of thunder. And here I stand, the heir, the rightful owner. The crowd broke into chaos. Some gasped, others muttered in disbelief. A few even clapped quietly, as if they were watching justice unfold before their eyes. The businessman who had been recording earlier looked at his phone, then at the old man, whispering to his friend, "Do you realize what this means? That man, he owns this entire bank." The pearl necklace woman, who had laughed the loudest earlier, now sat frozen, her face red with embarrassment. She whispered under her breath, "Impossible, it can't be." Whitman slammed his fist against the counter, desperate to regain control. "This is absurd. We are the bank. We are the law here." The old man turned to him slowly, his eyes steady, unwavering. "No, Mr. Whitman, you are not the law. The law is written, in ink older than your pride. Your bank prospered for 99 years because of my father's agreement. But that agreement has ended, and with it, so has your claim to this land." The words hit like a hammer. Whitman's mouth opened, but no words came. The lawyers exchanged uneasy glances, none of them daring to contradict the documents. The crowd was alive with whispers now, buzzing like a hive. The young banker clutched one of the pages tightly, her hands trembling. She looked up at the old man, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, you weren't lying. You really do own this place." The old man's eyes softened slightly. "Child, I have no need to lie. Lies crumble under truth, and truth always finds its way back, no matter how long it takes." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the bank, clients, workers, guards, saw him differently now. He was no longer the ragged old man with a dusty sack. He was something more, a living reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, always comes. And though Whitman still tried to hold himself tall, everyone could see it. The first cracks in the empire of arrogance had appeared. The first clue had been uncovered, and it was enough to change everything. The atmosphere in the bank lobby had shifted. A moment ago, it had been filled with laughter, jokes, and mocking whispers. Now it was quieter, heavier, like a storm cloud hanging overhead. The sack, once ridiculed, now lay on the marble counter surrounded by papers that looked disturbingly real. The young banker who had first spoken with the old man kept glancing nervously between the documents and the crowd. She had seen her fair share of scams, but something about this was different. These papers weren't crude fakes. If they were fake at all, they were masterfully done. The official seals, the language, the aged parchment, they looked authentic. And the way the old man carried himself, with patience, confidence, and unshakable resolve, didn't match the image of scammer. Still, she didn't dare make a decision. So she picked up the phone and dialed upstairs. "Sir," she whispered into the receiver, trying to keep her voice steady, "we have a situation in the lobby. An elderly man is here claiming. Well, he's claiming ownership of the bank. He has documents, old ones. That look—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Official." There was a sharp pause on the other end, followed by a sigh of irritation. The bank manager's deep, commanding voice replied, "Ownership? Of this bank? Ridiculous. I'll deal with it myself." And with that, he slammed the phone down. Within moments, the glass doors of the upper office clicked open, and out strode Mr. Richard Whitman, the bank's manager. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, he looked every inch the part of authority. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he descended the staircase, his expression carved in stone. The crowd straightened in their seats. The guards adjusted their stances. Even the mocking whispers quieted as Whitman entered the room. The old man, however, remained exactly as he was, calm, steady, hands resting on his sack. "What is this nonsense I'm hearing?" Whitman's voice boomed across the lobby. He fixed the old man with a sharp glare, the kind of look that had intimidated countless employees and clients alike. "You're claiming to own my bank?" A few chuckles returned among the crowd at his tone. It felt safe again to mock now that the manager was here. But the old man didn't blink. His voice was steady, unyielding. I claim nothing that is not mine. I am not here to play games. I am here because the truth must be honored. This land, this building, this institution, it belongs to my family. And the proof is here. He gestured to the documents spread across the counter. Whitman walked over briskly, his shoes echoing. He leaned down, picked up the top sheet, and scanned it with a scoff. Lease agreement? Expired after 99 years. He chuckled, shaking his head. Do you even understand how business works? Old man, this bank is worth billions. Do you think a few wrinkled papers will make you its owner? The crowd laughed again, reassured by Whitman's confidence. But the old man's voice rose, cutting through the noise. Billions do not erase signatures. Wealth does not erase law. And arrogance cannot erase truth. Read it carefully. You'll see that what was signed must now be honored. Whitman frowned, scanning the document more closely. His confident smirk faltered just slightly as his eyes ran over the dates and the official seals. He flipped to another page, then another, his brow furrowed. The young banker watched him closely. For the first time since she had met him, she saw something on his face she had never seen before. Hesitation. The crowd, too, began to sense it. The laughter softened into murmurs. A businessman whispered, "He doesn't look so sure anymore." Whitman straightened abruptly, covering his unease with authority. These papers are old. Too old. They prove nothing. Anyone could have forged them. Security. Escort this man out before he wastes any more of our time. The guard stepped forward, but the old man's voice thundered louder than it had all morning. Touch me, and you touch the rightful owner of this bank. Do you think I would walk in here unprepared? Every page here has been authenticated. Every seal. Every signature verified by historians and lawyers. Call your legal team, Mr. Whitman. I welcome their eyes. Because the truth cannot be erased by your pride. The guards froze, uncertain. The old man's words carried weight, not desperation. He sounded like someone who knew he was untouchable. Whitman clenched his jaw. His pride burned at being challenged in front of so many people. But a seed of doubt gnawed at him. If these papers were real, if the lease had truly expired, then the old man's claim wasn't nonsense. It was catastrophic. The young banker, still holding one of the documents, spoke up timidly. "Sir, maybe we should let the legal team take a look, just to be sure." Whitman's eyes snapped to her, cold and sharp. "Are you questioning me?" She flinched but stood her ground. "No, sir. But if these are real, ignoring them could be risky. Perhaps it's better confirm in private before making any decisions." The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. The energy in the room was shifting again. The people who had laughed the loudest now whispered nervously. Whitman's face tightened. He knew she was right. He couldn't afford to dismiss the papers outright, not without checking. If the old man was lying, the truth would expose him. But if he wasn't, Whitman turned back to the old man, his voice low and clipped. "Fine. We'll verify these documents. But know this. If you are lying, you will regret ever stepping foot in here." The old man gave a faint smile. "I have carried these papers for nearly a century. Do you think I fear the truth now?" His words lingered in the air like a challenge. The crowd was silent again, no laughter this time. The mocking had died, replaced by an uneasy curiosity. For the first time, the possibility had crept into their minds. What if he's telling the truth? And as Whitman gestured sharply for his staff to summon the legal team, the old man rested his hand once more on his sack, standing tall, unbroken. The battle had just begun. The room had been buzzing with laughter just moments ago, but when the old man untied the rope on his dusty sack, the atmosphere shifted. The mocking chuckles faded into curious whispers, and all eyes locked on him. What could possibly be inside? The sack looked ordinary, rough, faded from years of use, and coated with thin layer of dust. It was a kind of sack people might use to carry potatoes or coal, not something you'd expect to hold anything of value. Yet the way the old man handled it told a different story. His wrinkled hands moved carefully, almost reverently, as if he were about to reveal something sacred. Slowly, he reached inside and pulled out a bundle of old papers tied together with twine. The edges were yellow, the ink faded, and the faint smell of aged parchment filled the air. He set them down on the polished counter with deliberate care. The sound of paper against marble echoed louder than it should have, cutting through the silence. The young banker leaned forward, blinking in surprise. At first glance, the documents didn't look like trash. They looked official. Heavy parchment, watermarks, seals embossed into the paper. She hesitated, her professional instincts telling her these weren't ordinary scraps. But the crowd wasn't ready to believe. "Are you serious?" A man in a navy blue suit said loudly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "All that suspense, and it's just some old junk papers?" "Maybe it's his grocery list from 50 years ago." Another voice joked. Laughter rippled again, but softer this time, less confident. The old man ignored them. He spread the papers carefully, smoothing the fragile edges with steady fingers. His voice carried to the lobby, low but firm. "These documents tell a story this bank has tried to bury for nearly a century. My father, God rest his soul, was the rightful owner of this land. It was his signature that allowed the first foundation stone of this building to be laid. And these papers, these are the proof." He tapped the first document with a crooked finger. The banker, torn between disbelief and duty, leaned closer. Her eyes widened as she read the faded words. "Lease agreement. Term of 99 years. The old man continued, his voice gaining strength with every word. "My father leased this land to the bank's founders nearly 100 years ago. 99 years they were given to build, to prosper, to pay their dues. And 99 years have now passed. The lease has expired, and with its end, everything built here returns to the family that owns the land." Gasps filled the room. The businessman with the phone lowered it for a moment, his smirk fading. The woman with the pearl necklace frowned, her laughter dying in her throat. Even the guards exchanged uneasy glances. The banker's hands trembled as she picked up the document, holding it closer to the light. The seal was real, the signature authentic. She glanced back at the old man, suddenly unsure of everything. But the crowd wasn't ready to surrender so easily. "Ha!" a voice barked from the back. "Even if that's true, you think a piece of paper from the past gives you the right to walk in here and claim billions? This is a fairy tale, old man." The old man turned toward the voice, his gaze sharp. "Do you think wealth can erase truth? Do you think laughter can cancel justice? What is written. What is signed is binding. The passage of time does not weaken the truth. It strengthens it." The lobby fell into uneasy silence. Some people still smirked, but their laughter no longer carried the same weight. Doubt had begun to spread like a crack in glass. The old man reached into his sack again, pulling out more papers, maps, receipts, court filings, and even photographs. He laid them out one by one, each piece weaving together a history no one in the room had ever known. One photo showed his father standing proudly on an empty plot of land that looked suspiciously like the very ground where the bank now stood. Another document detailed the exact coordinates, signed by city officials of a time long past. Each page was a puzzle piece, and together they formed a picture too clear to dismiss. The banker swallowed hard. Her training told her to remain neutral, but she couldn't help the tremor in her voice as she asked, "Sir, these documents, where have they been all this time?" The old man's eyes softened, his voice heavy with memory. "In this sack. My father gave him to me before he passed, warning me of the day when the lease would expire. For decades, I carried them. People mocked me, just as you all mock me today. They said I was crazy, clinging to worthless papers. But I carried them because I knew this day would come." He lifted the sack, holding it tightly against his chest. "This sack is not a beggar's burden. It is a vault of truth, heavier than gold, older than any fortune built in these walls. For years, I bore the weight of it alone. And today, the weight has reached its end." His words resonated in the marble hall like a sermon. The people who had laughed now looked unsettled. The businessman with the phone stopped recording altogether. The guards no longer smirked. Even the wealthy clients shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. For the first time, they saw the old man not as a beggar with a sack, but as someone carrying the weight of history itself. Still, a few skeptics held out. Documents can be forged, one man muttered. This could all be a trick. The old man's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. Then let your manager come. Let your lawyers come. Let the truth be tested. I have waited decades. I can wait a few moments more. He stepped back, placing his weathered hands firmly on the sack, his eyes never wavering. The silence in the room grew heavier, broken only by the distant ticking of clock above. The sack that everyone had mocked, the sack they thought carried nothing but rags or scraps, had now become the center of the room. It was no longer a symbol of poverty. It was a symbol of power, a vessel of secrets that could topple the pride of an entire bank. And though laughter had filled the room minutes earlier, now it was gone, replaced by unease, replaced by whispers, replaced by the first taste of fear. The sack had spoken, and the truth inside it was only beginning to unfold. The moment the old man's words echoed to the marble hall, "Tell your manager the owner of this bank has arrived," the atmosphere shifted like a spark catching dry wood. At first, there was stunned silence. For a few seconds, you could almost hear the tick of the giant clock hanging above the main lobby. But then, like the breaking of a dam, the laughter began. A businessman sitting nearby leaned back in his leather chair, throwing his head back with a booming laugh. He pointed toward the old man and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Owner of the bank? My God, that's the funniest thing I've heard all week." Another client, a young man in a tailored suit, quickly pulled out his phone. With a sly grin, he whispered to his friend, "This is going viral. Old beggar claims bank ownership. Can you imagine the views?" His friend smirked and angled his phone discreetly, already recording the scene. The security guards at the door chuckled among themselves. One muttered, "He's got guts. I'll give him that. But he's in the wrong place to play king." The other guard smirked. "Let him talk. The more he says, the funnier it'll be." Even the tellers behind the counters tried to stifle their giggles. A young woman whispered to her co-worker, "You think he even knows where he is? This is the biggest bank in the city." Her co-worker shrugged, grinning. "Maybe he got lost on his way to the soup kitchen." The sound of laughter rolled through the hall like a cruel wave. Some chuckled politely. Others mocked loudly, and a few whispered under their breath as though the old man were invisible. The polished, pristine lobby, usually a place of hushed voices and polite manners, had suddenly turned into a stage for humiliation. And yet, in the middle of it all, the old man stood calm and still. He didn't shrink back. He didn't frown. His weathered face carried no embarrassment, no fear. His sack rested at his feet, his rough hands gripping the handle firmly, as though it anchored him to the ground. He stared forward with quiet resolve, his eyes steady despite the storm of mockery around him. The young banker at the desk, torn between professionalism and disbelief, finally stepped closer. She lowered her voice and said gently, "Sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding. This bank belongs to a corporation. It has hundreds of shareholders. It can't possibly be owned by one person, especially," she trailed off, unwilling to say the words that were on everyone's mind, "especially someone like you." The old man's lips curved into a faint smile. "My dear," he replied softly but firmly, "you speak of what you know today, but I speak of what was written long before you were born." The banker blinked, confused, but before she could respond, another voice cut through the air. It was a middle-aged woman wearing a pearl necklace and holding a stack of documents. She had been waiting for her appointment, but now found herself thoroughly entertained. With a mocking laugh, she said loudly, "Does he really think he can just walk in here with a sack and take over a bank? I've seen beggars at the subway with more sense than this." The crowd chuckled. Someone from the back shouted, "Hey, old man, if you're the owner, where's your chauffeur? Where's your car? Where's your suit?" Another voice chimed in, "Check that sack. Maybe he's hiding gold bars in there." More laughter erupted, but the old man didn't flinch. He slowly turned his head toward the voices, his gaze calm but piercing, and then back to the banker. He said again, louder this time so everyone could hear, I came to see a manager, not to entertain children with laughter. That simple sentence silenced a few people for a moment. There was something in the way he said it, something commanding, as though he were used to being in control, used to being obeyed. But then the businessmen snickered again, brushing it off. He's crazy, one muttered. Completely crazy. The young banker sighed. She had dealt with rude clients, frustrated customers, even scammers. But this was different. She didn't know whether to pity the old man or feel annoyed by him. She tried again, more firmly. Sir, if you don't have an account here, and if you're not here for official business, I'll have to ask you to leave. This is a place of work, not whatever this is. At that, the old man slowly bent down, untied the rope of his sack, and placed one hand inside. For a moment, the laughter died down. Everyone leaned forward, curious. What was in there? A nervous guard stepped closer, his hand brushing the holster of his belt. He muttered, "Careful, sir. Nothing dangerous." But the old man only chuckled softly. Dangerous? No, young man. What I carry is not dangerous. It is powerful. He pulled out a thick bundle of old, yellow papers. The edges were frayed, the ink faded, but the documents bore official seals, signatures, and stamps. He laid them carefully on the marble counter, as if placing down a treasure. The crowd erupted in laughter once more. Papers! Someone jeered. Does he think monopoly money counts here? Another voice mocked. That looks like my grandmother's grocery list. But this time, not everyone laughed. A few curious eyes leaned in. There was something undeniably official about the documents. They weren't scribbles or random pages. They looked real, legal, important. The old man looked around the room, his voice steady and unshaken. You laugh because you don't know. But inside this sack is a proof of ownership. Ownership older than this bank itself. My father signed these papers. And on this ground, on this very land, this building was raised. And now, the time has come for the truth to be honored. The laughter softened into uneasy murmurs. For the first time, a flicker of doubt appeared in the eyes of some of the onlookers. The old man's tone was not one of delusion. It was one of certainty. And though many still smirked, recording him, mocking him, waiting to see him thrown out, the seed of curiosity had been planted. The old man, ignored and ridiculed moments ago, had just shifted the atmosphere. The laughter that had filled the room was beginning to sound a little nervous.